Over the past century, African American life, history, and culture have become major forces in the United States and the world. African Americans in music, art, and literature have become appreciated by the global community. Many other people of African descent have been instrumental in shaping world politics, war, diplomacy, entertainment, and athletics. The Garfield Heights City Schools would like to celebrate Black History Month in February. Thurgood Marshall was born July 2, 1908, and died January 24, 1993. He was an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, serving from October 1967 until October 1991. Marshall was the court's 96th justice and its first African American justice. Mary Jane McLeod Bethune was born July 10, 1875, and died May 18, 1955. She was an American educator and a civil rights leader, best known for starting a school for African American students in Daytona Beach, Florida. That eventually became Bethune-Cookman University, and for being an advisor to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. She was known as the First Lady of the Struggle because of her commitment to bettering African Americans in America. Jack Roosevelt, Jackie Robinson, was born January 31, 1919, and died October 24, 1972. He was an American baseball player who became the first African American to play in the Major League Baseball in the modern era. Robinson broke the baseball color line when the Brooklyn Dodgers started him at first base on April 15, 1947. As the first major league team to play a black man since the 1880s, the Dodgers ended racial segregation that had regulated black players to the Negro Leagues for 6 decades. The example of Robinson's character and unquestionable talent challenged the traditional basis of segregation, which then marked many other aspects of American life and contributed significantly to the civil rights movement. Josephine Baker was born June 3, 1906, and died April 12, 1975. She was an American-born French dancer, singer, and actress who came to be known in various circles as the Black Pearl, Bronze Venus, and even the Creole Goddess. Born Frida Josephine McDonald in St. Louis, Missouri, Josephine later became a citizen of France in 1937. She was fluent in both English and French. Medgar Wiley Evers was born July 2, 1925, and died June 12, 1963. He was an African American civil rights activist from Mississippi involved in efforts to overturn segregation at the University of Mississippi. After returning from overseas military service in World War II and completing his secondary education, he became active in the civil rights movement. He became a field secretary for the NAACP. Evers was assassinated by Byron Dale LeBeckwith, a member of the White Citizens Council. As a veteran, Evers was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His murder and the resulting trials inspired civil rights protests, as well as numerous works of art, music, and film. Rosa Parks was born February 4, 1913, and died October 24, 2005. She was an African American civil rights activist, whom the United States Congress called the First Lady of Civil Rights, and the Mother of the Freedom Movement. Her birthday, February 4th, and the day she was arrested, December 1st, have both become Rosa Parks Day. On December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Parks refused to obey bus driver James F. Blake's orders that she give up her seat in the colored section to a white passenger. After the white section was filled, Parks was not the first person to resist bus segregation. Others had taken similar steps in the 20th century, including Irene Morgan in 1946, Sarah Louise Keyes in 1955. The NAACP organizers believed that Parks was the best candidate for seeing through a court challenge after her arrest for civil disobedience in violating Alabama segregation laws, though eventually her case became bogged down in the state courts. Sir Sidney Poitier was born February 20th, 1927. He is an American-born Bohemian actor, film director, author, and diplomat. In 1963, Poitier became the first black person to win an Academy Award for Best Actor for his role in Lilies of the Field. The significance of this achievement was later bolstered in 1967 when he starred in 3 successful films, To Sir with Love, In the Heat of the Night, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, making him the top box office star of that year. In all 3 films, issues revolved around the race of the characters Poitier portrayed. In 1999, the American Film Institute named Poitier among the greatest male stars of all time, ranking 22nd on the list of 25. Toni Morrison was born February 18, 1931. She's an American novelist, editor, and professor. Her novels are known for their epic themes, vivid dialogue, and richly detailed characters. Among her best-known novels are The Bluest Eye, Sula, Song of Solomon, and Beloved. She was also commissioned to write the libretto for a new opera. Margaret Gardner first performed in 2005. She won the Pulitzer Prize in 1988 for Beloved and the Nobel Prize in 1993. On the 29th of May 2012, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Booker Washington was born April 5, 1856, and died November 14, 1915. He was an African-American educator, author, orator, and advisor to the President of the United States. Between 1890 and 1915, Washington was the dominant leader in the African-American community. Washington was of the last generation of black American leaders born into slavery and became the leading voice of the former slaves and their descendants, who were newly oppressed by the Jim Crow discriminatory laws enacted in the post-Reconstruction of the South states in the 19th and early 20th centuries. In 1895, his Atlanta Compromise called for avoiding confrontation over segregation and instead putting more reliance on long-term educational and economic advancement in the black community. Minnie Jocelyn Elders was born Minnie Lee Jones on August 13, 1933. She's an American pediatrician and public health administrator. She was Vice Admiral in the Public Health Service Commissioner Corps and the first African American appointed as Surgeon General of the United States. Elder is best known for her frank discussion of her views on controversial issues such as drug legalization and distributing contraception in schools. She was fired midterm in December of 1994 amidst controversy. She is currently a professor of pediatrics at the University of Akron for Medical Sciences. James Cleveland Jesse Owens was born September 12, 1913, and died March 31, 1980. He was an American track and field athlete who specialized in the sprints and the long jump. Owens first came to national attention when he was a student at East Technical High School in Cleveland, Ohio. He equaled the world record of 9.4 seconds in the 100-yard dash and a long jump of 24 feet 9.5 inches at the 1933 National High School Championships in Chicago. He participated in the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin, Germany, where he achieved the international fame by winning 4 gold medals, one each in the 100 meters, the 200 meters, the long jump, and as part of the 4x100 meter relay team. He was the most successful athlete at the 1936 Summer Olympics. Althea Gibson was born August 25, 1927, and died September 28, 2003. She was an American tennis player and professional golfer, and the first black athlete of either gender to cross the color line of international tennis. In 1956, she became the first person of color to win a Grand Slam title, the French Open. The following year, she won both Wimbledon and the U.S. Nationals, precursor to the U.S. Open, then won both again in 1958. She was voted Female Athlete of the Year by the Associated Press in both years. In all, she won 11 Grand Slam tournaments, including 6 doubles titles, and was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame and the International Women's Sports Hall of Fame. She is one of the greatest players who ever lived, said Robert Ryland, a tennis contemporary and former coach of Venus and Serena Williams. Martina couldn't touch her. I think she'd beat the Williams sisters. In the early 1960s, she also became the first black player to compete on the Women's Professional Golf Tour. Nathaniel Adams Coles was born March 17, 1919, and died February 15, 1965, known professionally as Nat King Cole. He was an American singer and musician who first came to prominence as a leading jazz piano player. He was widely noted for his soft baritone voice, which he used to perform in big band and jazz genres. Cole was one of the first African Americans to host a television variety show, The Nat King Cole Show, and has maintained worldwide popularity since his death from lung cancer in February of 1965. Oprah Gail Winfrey was born January 29, 1954. She's an American media proprietor, talk show host, actress, producer, philanthropist. Winfrey is best known for the multi-award-winning talk show, The Oprah Winfrey Show, which was the highest-rated program of its kind in history and was nationally syndicated from 1986 to 2011. She has been ranked the richest African American of the 20th century, the greatest black philanthropist in American history, and is currently North America's only black billionaire. She is also, according to some assessments, the most influential woman in the world. In 2013, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama and an honorary doctorate degree from Harvard University. Denzel Hayes Washington Jr. was born December 28, 1954. He is an American actor, film director, and film producer. He has received much critical acclaim for his work in films since the 1990s, including his portrayals of real-life figures such as Malcolm X, Reuben Hurricane Carter, Melvin B. Tolson, Frank Lucas, and Herman Boone. Washington is a feature actor in the films produced by Jerry Bruckheimer and was a frequent collaborator of the late director Tony Scott. Elizabeth Bessie Coleman was born January 26, 1892, and died April 30, 1926. She was an American civil aviator. She was the first female pilot of African American descent and the first person of African American descent to hold an international pilot's license. Michael Jeffrey Jordan was born February 17, 1963, also known by his initials MJ. He is an American former professional basketball player, entrepreneur, and major owner and chairman of the Charlotte Bobcats. His biography on the National Basketball Association website states, by acclamation, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. Jordan was one of the most effectively marketed athletes of his generation and was considered instrumental in popularizing the NBA around the world in the 1980s and the 1990s. Maria Halle Berry was born August 14, 1966. She's an American actress and former fashion model, originally from Cleveland, Ohio. She won an Academy Award for the Best Actress in 2002 for her performance in Monsters Ball, becoming the first and, as of 2013, the only woman of African American descent to win an Oscar for her leading role. She is one of the highest paid actresses in Hollywood and has been involved in the production side of several other films in which she performed. Berry is also the Revlon spokesmodel. Alexander Murray Palmer Haley was born August 11, 1921, and died February 10, 1992. He was an American writer. He is best known as the author of the 1976 book Roots, The Saga of an American Family, and the co-author of the autobiography of Malcolm X. W.E.B. Du Bois was a scholar and a political activist. He helped found the National Association for Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. Du Bois attended Harvard University and in 1895 became the first African American to receive a doctorate from that school. He became a university professor, a prolific writer, and a pioneering social scientist on the topic of Black culture. Matthew A. Henson was the longtime assistant to Robert E. Peary on his expeditions to the North Pole. Henson is believed to be the first man to actually reach the pole, some 45 minutes ahead of Peary, on the 6th of April, 1909. Henson, an African American, ran away from home at the age of 11 and went to sea as a cabin boy. An able and intelligent seaman, he was hired by Peary in the late 1880s and accompanied him on his 1891 Greenland expedition. An expert with sleds and dogs and fluent in the Inuit language, Henson joined Peary off on for nearly 2 decades in the quest to reach the North Pole. Dr. May Carroll Jemison became the first black woman to travel into outer space on the 12th of September, 1992, an 8-day orbit aboard the spaceship Endeavour. Raised in Chicago, she went to Stanford at the age of 16 and graduated in 1977. She then earned her medical degree from Cornell University and became a physician in 1981. She practiced medicine in Los Angeles and served in the Peace Corps in Africa before being approved for astronaut training with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in 1987. She spent the next 6 years at NASA, ending up on missions STS-47 aboard the Shuttle Endeavour in 1992. Ben Carson graduated with a degree from Yale University in psychology in 1973, then graduated from medical school at the University of Michigan in 1977. He studied neurosurgery at the young age of 33 and became the director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. He was perhaps the best known for his pioneering work in radical surgeries, the removal of half the brain to help seizure patients, and as the specialist in the separation of conjoining Siamese twins. Dr. Ben Carson became an outspoken political figure and a Republican presidential candidate in the year 2016. He was chosen to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development by President-elect Donald Trump late in 2016. Eric Holder is a veteran lawyer who served as a U.S. Attorney General under President Barack Obama from 2009 to 15. Eric Holder is a graduate of Columbia University in 1973 and Columbia Law School in 1976. He joined the Department of Justice straight out of law school, working his way through the ranks until becoming an associate judge on the Superior Court of the District of Columbia in 1988. He then served as Deputy Attorney General under Janet Reno from 1997 until 2001. In 2007, he became a co-chair of Barack Obama's presidential campaign. Obama won the presidency in November of 2008 and nominated Eric Holder to become Attorney General. Holder was confirmed by the Senate on the 2nd of February 2009. Eric Holder was the first African American to serve as Attorney General.
Colin Powell became the first African American Secretary of State in U.S. history when he took office in 2001. Powell was a career soldier who fought in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. He rose through the ranks to become a general, then became National Security Advisor to President Ronald Reagan. Powell became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under George Bush the Elder, directing U.S. forces during the First Gulf War. Powell retired in 1993 and published his autobiography, My American Journey, in 1995. He was chosen by George W. Bush to be Secretary of State in 2001.
Langston Hughes published more than 36 books during his life, starting out with poetry and then expanding into novels, short stories, and plays. He is closely associated with the Harlem Renaissance, the flowering of African American literature and music in New York City following World War I. But he wrote poetry, books, and newspaper columns right through into the 1960s. Hughes' work often spoke plainly about the lives of ordinary black people, which in turn, in later years, earned him a reputation as one of the major black voices of the 1900s. His works include the poetry volumes The Weary Blues in 1926 and Shakespeare in Harlem in 1942. George Washington Carver was a celebrated botanist and inventor at the time when it was still rare for African Americans to reach those heights. The son of a Missouri slave, George Washington Carver grew up to attend Iowa State University, earning a bachelor's degree in 1894 and a master's in 1896. He then joined the faculty of Booker T. Washington's Tuskegee Institute. His attempts to find crop alternatives to cotton led him to the peanut. Eventually, he created more than 325 products from the humble nut, helping to create the demand for the plant and establish it as a major American crop. George Washington Carver also worked with sweet potatoes, soybeans, and pecans, among other plants, and is often credited with changing the face of agriculture in the American South. Martin Delany was an African-American abolitionist, journalist, and physician and writer. He was born free in Charlestown, West Virginia. Delany was an outspoken black nationalist, arguably the first, and is considered by some to be the grandfather of black nationalism. He was also one of the first 3 blacks admitted to Harvard Medical School. Trained as an assistant and a physician, he treated patients during the cholera epidemics of 1833 and 1854 in Pittsburgh, when many doctors and residents fled the city. Active in recruiting blacks for the United States colored troops, he was commissioned as a major, the first African-American field officer in the United States Army during the American Civil War. Garrett Morgan was an African-American inventor and businessman. He was the first person to patent a traffic signal. He also developed the gas mask and many other inventions. Morgan was born in Paris, Kentucky, and was the son of a former slave, and the seventh of 11 children. His formal education ended during elementary school. In 1907, he started his own sewing equipment and repair shop. His business expanded in 1909. He employed 32 people who used equipment that Morgan made and invented himself. In 1920, Morgan went into the newspaper business and started the Cleveland Call. He was very successful and eventually bought a car. While he was driving along the streets of Cleveland, he realized how unsafe intersections were and was determined to make driving safer. Morgan patented the traffic signal on November 20th, 1923. Morgan developed many other inventions, including a safety hood, smoke protector for firefighters, and gas masks. He also developed a zigzag sewing machine attachment, a hair straightener, hair dyeing lotions, decurling hair combs, and other inventions. Benjamin Banneker, born in 1731 and a descendant of African slaves, was a self-taught scientist, mathematician, farmer, astronomer, urban planner, you name it. In 1792, Banneker published the first of 8 almanacs, Table of the Position of Celestial Bodies, which also included commentaries, literature, and fillers that had political and humanitarian purpose. Annie Easley. Few people have the brilliance to be a mathematician and a computer scientist. To top it off, Annie Easley was a rocket scientist. She spent 34 years from 1955 to 1985 at NASA and was influential in making modern space travel possible. She was a leading member of the team that developed software for the Centaur rocket stage and one of the first African Americans in her field. Easley's secret to success? Her mother told her that anything was possible. Astronaut Guion Bluford became the first African American in space when he flew on the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1983. Guion Bluford was a former Air Force pilot who flew over 104 combat missions in the Vietnam War in 1966 and 67. Earlier, he had received a BS degree in engineering from Penn State in 1964, and after his wartime service, he received a master's degree in 74 and a PhD in 1978 from the Air Force Institute of Technology. He joined the NASA Astronaut Corps in 1979. Guion was a mission specialist on 4 different shuttle flights. According to his Air Force biography, he spent a total of 688 hours in space over his 4 missions. He retired from NASA and the Air Force with the rank of colonel in 1993 and became a businessman. He was made a member of the International Space Hall of Fame in 1997. Barack Obama served as President of the United States from 2009 to 2017. He was the 44th U.S. President and the first African American president in American history. Barack Obama has spoken often of his multicultural background. His father was from Kenya and his mother from Kansas, and they met at the University of Hawaii. He earned an undergraduate degree from Columbia University in 1983 and a law degree from Harvard in 1991. He also taught constitutional law for 12 years at the University of Chicago. Barack was elected to the Illinois Senate in 1996 and then to the U.S. Senate in 2004. Barack Obama ran successfully for re-election in 2012, defeating Republican candidate Mitt Romney on November 6, 2012. Muhammad Ali, charismatic, outspoken, and nicknamed the greatest, heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali was the dominant heavyweight fighter of the 1960s and 1970s. A fighter of exceptional speed, cunning, and flair, Muhammad Ali won the world heavyweight title on 3 separate occasions over a span of 15 years. He was born Cassius Clay, and under the name he won a gold medal at the 1960 Olympics in Rome. After claiming his first title by defeating Sonny Liston in 1964, Clay joined the Nation of Islam and changed his name to Muhammad Ali. Citing his Islamic faith, Ali refused to serve in the U.S. military during the war in Vietnam. His title was revoked and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for draft evasion. The U.S. Supreme Court reversed the conviction in 1971, and Ali returned to boxing. In retirement, Muhammad Ali remained one of the world's best-known and most popular athletes. Martin Luther King Jr. was an African-American clergyman who advocated for social change through nonviolent means, a powerful speaker, and a man of great spiritual strength. He shaped the American civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Dr. Martin Luther King was the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama in 1954 through 1959. There, he led blacks in the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955 and 56, an action inspired by the arrest of Rosa Parks when she refused to give up her seat on a public bus. King returned to his hometown to Atlanta, Georgia in 1959 and became a co-pastor with his father at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, a position he held until his death. On the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1963, King organized a march on Washington, D.C. that drew over 200,000 people demanding equal rights for minorities. Dr. Martin Luther King won the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize, becoming, at the time, the youngest recipient ever. His writings include Stride Toward Freedom, 1958, A History of the Montgomery Bus Boycott, Why Can't We Wait, 1963, and Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, 1967. King was shot to death by James Earl Ray in 1968 while visiting Memphis, Tennessee. Black History Month, or National African American History Month, is an annual celebration of achievements by Black Americans and a time for recognizing the central role of African Americans in U.S. history. The event grew out of Negro History Week, the brainchild of noted historian Carter G. Woodson and other prominent African Americans. Since 1976, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month. Other countries around the world, including Canada and the United Kingdom, also devote a month to celebrating Black history. Black history and culture is such a part of the American fabric and the school curriculum that it's difficult to imagine a time when that wasn't so. Established as Negro History Week in the 1920s by Carter G. Woodson, February was chosen for the celebration because Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln were born in this month. Extended to a month-long celebration in 1976, Black History Month is an opportunity to emphasize the history and achievements of African Americans.